you know. What can I grow now? How do I grow big? Like Grow Big TV. Talking right here.
Hey, welcome to Grow Big TV.
Laughing out loud. But I'm still learning. You're on Grow Big TV. On Grow Big TV.
And here's Joe and Corky.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Grow Big TV. We have an epic live today. If you guys could please put a like to the channel and share this out, we really appreciate it. This is a pre-recorded live, and we're going to have an after party after this. So if you guys come at 10 o'clock, it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to give out a lot of Marysheirloomseeds, some MI Gardener seeds, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So today we're going to have Gardener Scott, and we're going to have Marysheirloomseeds. And Corky, who else do we have?
In the house. And then we have Tony from Simplified Garden. Yay! Can't wait.
So with everybody combined, there's over 1 million subscribers. There's going to be so much information in this live, and hopefully you guys can put stuff in your pocket. That's one of my phrases I always use. Put it in the pocket. Learn something, write it down, and see if it works for you. And I hope you guys could do that today. So let's welcome Gardener Scott, Tony O'Neill, Marysheirloomseeds, and Sean at Chili Chump.
Woo-hoo!
Welcome, everybody.
Hi.
Thank you guys for being here.
Great to be here, Joe and Corky.
You're welcome.
So there's tons of gardening issues all over the place, and we're from all parts of the world. And so, we do things a little different. And that's a great way to everybody coming together and just talking, communicating, doing roundtables, and see what you do. But we all start somewheres. And it's why we garden. It's that why statement. And part of my why is I started when I was very young. I had next door. I had lived next to a farm, and communicating with my neighbor was great. My father always said, if you look somebody if somebody talks to you, make sure you have the same that you follow everything that they say, because they don't have to listen to you. They don't have to talk to you. They don't have to do. You could just be some next door neighbor that they don't care about. But if they talk to you, they're important to you, so you should be important to them.
Yeah.
And so listen to them, look into their eye. And so part of my another why statement is my son has health issues, and I want to grow the healthiest garden I can, the most organic garden I can. And not just for me, for my son, but for my family and my friends, and to keep on expanding that community. So that's part of
your Uber customers.
Yeah, I Uber as a part-time job on weekends. And then, I have a donation stand in front of my house. That's what I do for what I grow. And I give away food in my Uber rides. And so sometimes
really funny, you get though when he makes them try hot peppers.
Sean will love this. So a lot of times I have zucchini and tomatoes, but I also have hot peppers. And so you have the 21-year-olds going out to party, and we have one of those friends that like, hey, I dare you eat this. If you have 4 guys in a car, one of those guys are going to say, I'll try it, I'll eat it, no problem. And all of a sudden, I warn them. I make sure it's the end of the ride, and I go, guys, listen, this is Carolina Reapers. This is some other peppers, crosses, everything else. This is going to be the hottest thing. You should not eat this right now. I totally warn them. Period. Then all of a sudden, oh, I'll have it. No, I had hot peppers before. I didn't have a jalapeno before, or a habanero. And all of a sudden you see one of them, oh, it's hot. Oh my God. Oh my God. Sorry, dude, I have no milk for you. I warned you.
That's all
And
you
I
can
said,
do.
hey, you guys want some for the end of the ride? You guys can take this to your party.
I'm guessing none of you. I'm guessing none of you have been called to the principal's office when you were in your late 50s. When I was at the school garden, I was growing habaneros, and some of the students decided to do exactly that, Joe. They took some of the habaneros, they took them back to class, and one of the students said, I dare you to eat the habanero in the middle of math class. And I got the call from the principal because 3 students were at the nurse's office from eating habaneros, and I was commanded to rip them out of the garden and never grow hot peppers again.
You get a detention?
Pretty close, yes.
For my 50th birthday party, so a lot of kids are there. Well, the kids went back to the hot pepper patch. They came back. Kids are crying because you have a pepper. What do? Wipe your eye. Kids are like, I can't see. I can't see.
Oh.
I'm like, I told you not to go back there.
It's horrible.
It was terrible.
I know my husband has knocked me out multiple times making his hot pepper concoctions, hot sauce. I was in the middle of doing a really big live for my channel, and he decided to unveil his fermented hot sauce, and I couldn't breathe. I had to keep the door closed. I had fans running. I'm like, you're trying to kill me. It was horrible.
So going around, starting with Gardener Scott, what is your why statement? Why do you garden? Why do you garden?
Well, I think the why statement actually evolves in time. In the beginning, my why statement, by beginning, I mean 30 years ago, my beginning why was it was something new. I wanted to try it, and I just wanted to get outside. And since then, my why statement has evolved into I want to share the passion of gardening with others all around the world. I want to teach, I want to guide, I want to motivate. And that's, to me, what gardening is all about. It may be a single why statement, but the more you do it, the more there is about it. The health benefits from eating and from being outside, the education benefits from learning about the botany and the microbe science and the weather aspects. There's just so many whys that I can't narrow it down to a single one. And I'm looking forward to whatever that next why is going to be in my gardening journey, actually.
And Sean, what's your why statement?
I grew up on a farm in South Africa, and as much as I probably didn't enjoy it as much as I should have back then, when you're a young person, you get stuck with the chores. I still have very fond memories of that time, and I think when I came over to the UK, I work in the tech field, so it's a busy life, and it's very far removed from my life on the farm. So I always wanted to get back into something of gardening, farming, not necessarily with the animals like we did, but something along the lines of what we used to do, growing things, because it is so satisfying. I think we lose that joy of patience, right? I think too many people are so used to things happening so quickly. It's that immediacy of everything that we have today. But the true joy of planting a seed and in 9 months' time having the fruit of that labor is amazing. And yeah, I started with chilies. I've always loved chilies and got obsessed with them back when the Biochar came out, and that won some records, the ghost pepper. And it's kind of evolved from there, but it's similar to Scott. It's also what's evolving for me is I love teaching people about this. And if I can pass on the joy of having some patience and realizing that not everything has to happen right now, especially for the youngsters, then I've done my job. And those are the best messages I get, is when I get a parent or even the kid, 14 years old, telling me, hey, I want to show you my chili plant that I grew because I watched your channel. That just means so much to me, rather than
so
I was
cool.
playing on my Xbox today and I got angry at someone and swore at them down the microphone. You know, it's things like that that really keep me going on doing this journey.
Mary?
And of course, chilies are amazing. So
I think there's a general consensus with the why evolving over time. I didn't grow up on a farm, but I had grandparents that one had a farm and the other just grew quite possibly the most delicious tomatoes, still something you can taste back from your childhood. So when I started Mary's Heirloom Seeds, I already had the background of growing food, but I started because I was learning more and more about what was going into our foods, between the growing process.
oh no.
Aspect of it and the pesticides and herbicide use. I wanted to offer a clean seed, and B, a clean way of growing that seed, so you have a healthier garden, a healthier produce, and hopefully a healthier lifestyle. So that was 2011, I think, when I started Mary's Heirloom Seeds. But beyond that, growing and now teaching. We were talking about school gardens earlier, and behind me is what's left of the seeds for the school garden donation program. So as early as 2012, nice. I started donating just to a single school and volunteering my time, to where now it's grown to over 150 schools in the US and community gardens. And like Sean said, when you get somebody that emails you and they're like, look what I grew, I've never been able to grow whatever it is, and now they have this successful plant, and it might sound silly to people that aren't growing or don't have that experience, but once you experience it, it's something you want to do all the time. Yeah. So my why is ever evolving, but growing food, teaching people how to grow that food, and then also just enjoying the experience is almost addicting. Well, it kind of is.
Tony?
Yeah, so for me, it was more to spend time with my grandfather. So when I was 7 years old, I would go to the allotments with him, and that was where my gardening journey started. But as I grow, like everybody else, it evolves. And for me, it was a coping mechanism for dealing with things that I had to deal with in work. Everybody copes with things differently, and a way to keep my sanity, I suppose. The garden just allowed me to get my hands in the soil and just to let all that stuff go, And I think that's really important for people to be able to have that release if they need it. And then as the children came on and everything else, it was my son and myself are celiac, so it was like, right now I really want to make sure that the food we're eating is as the best quality that we could produce, and that's really where it is. And I think it's safe to say that all of us here, we all have been able to pass that knowledge on to other people. Otherwise we wouldn't be doing putting all the time into our channels and everything else and making educational videos that we do, because it does take up a lot of time, but we do it because obviously we want to pass that information on. So really that's pretty much why I do it now.
Topic: the purple tomato. Now, Corky and I have talked about this a lot, and I don't really think there's anything wrong with the tomato, but what happens to the environment with it, with the bees and everything else? The bees, if they touch a coating of this GMO seed, they die. So I just want to know, what do you guys think about the purple tomato? Starting with Gardner Scott.
Well, I think it's important to first recognize why the purple tomato was developed, and its intent is to increase the health benefits, because of the dark color purple, which is healthy in most vegetables. I think there's a misconception about GMOs by a number of people. We hear about the glowing green, that gene that was, input into some other animal. And so that's really not what happened exactly in this case. And so I think it's still too early to assume that just because the increased color purple is part of the genetics, that it's going to cause insect damage or that it can spread to another plant. I don't see that as likely. But what I understand about genetics, it's not going to be transferred. And so I'm not that worried about it at this point. Being the first GMO in a home garden, I think it's going to get a lot of attention. There's going to be a lot of gardeners that try it. And I predict that in the long run, most people are going to end up growing the purple tomato.
I don't know enough about the purple tomato to really talk too much about that situation. But in terms of GMO, I think I kind of agree with Scott. I think there's quite a lot of fear mongering around this. If we look at something like chilies, there's just so many different varieties new varieties coming out every single year. And most of that's done by cross-pollinating, things like that. If suddenly somebody came along and decided to do something genetically modified, cells and things like that to try and get a hotter chili or different colors and things like that. Again, I don't think we should be playing like that. There's enough variety out there for us not to have to do that. But I think the majority of the time, these GMOs, that they're trying to make the seeds different in a way that either it's going to be disease proof, it's going to give you bigger harvests and things like that. It's trying to solve world hunger. I get it from that perspective. When you're doing it just because, hey, it looks pretty, then I kind of question the reasoning behind it. So I'm kind of sitting on the fence with this. I don't really have a strong opinion. I'm not against GMO. I'm not for it. But I know enough about the hunger that goes on in Africa. And to be honest, if they come out with something that was genetically modified rice that increased the harvest 10 times over and it needed half the amount of water and half the amount of nutrients, I'd be all for that, right? If it's going to help with that hunger situation. But if we're just making it so we can have a multicolored rice, that's a different story, right?
Okay.
Mary?
So I am actually on the fence as far as I see it as less of a concern in the genetic modification sphere than I would, like Joe, you mentioned a coating of a seed, like a neonicotinoid that is going to potentially harm your pollinators. But that's not the case in this. The creator of the purple GMO tomato is touting it as a cancer-fighting product. But their other intention is also to make the term genetic modification or a GMO less scary for the average consumer. And while I see definitely the issue with the fear mongering, it's less of a concern than, say, that I have personally with, say, Bill Gates working on an mRNA vaccine related or crossed lettuce. So the purple tomato isn't going to, it's too early to say, well, it's going to cure cancer or it's going to cure world hunger. So it's more so just from what I see it, it's more of a marketing campaign. People are going to buy it. People are going to get excited about it. But next year, it's going to be something different. It's just kind of a flashy, ooh, look at this. I'm growing it for the sake of growing it. And it kind of remains to be seen what is going to happen to it. Am I going to grow it? Nope. Am I going to sell it? Definitely not. But I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that are going to enjoy it. I'm just going to stick to my purple heirlooms because it's not like we don't have, I think I have 9 or 10 different purple heirloom tomato varieties that I'm growing. So why do I want to add a genetically modified tomato that maybe I will have the right to save the seeds next year and grow, But if that company that owns that patent decides next year that they don't want me growing it, they can fully enforce their right because they own that seed.
Right.
Tony?
Yeah, so just like the last few guys, my issue with GMO is the patent, because it's being done by a company to make money, and that is the only reason they're doing it. It's not to deal with world hunger. It's not to fight off cancer, because I mean, how long have we been trying to fight cancers in this world? And we have drugs that can do a lot of good.
Right.
But those drugs come at a cost as well. And it's exactly the same thing. If they had a tomato tomorrow that cured cancer, you can bet your bottom dollar it would be available to only the very the minority of people who could afford to purchase it, and the rest of the people wouldn't be getting it. And again, the patent issue is, I don't think any seed should be controlled by a company. So, to be able to be told tomorrow, well, we own the patent for that, you can't grow it, I think is absolutely ridiculous. And that's my issue with GMO. Not that they've been genetically modified. I think that the ability for everybody to grow it should be there and not be controlled by the few, because you get a seed that all of a sudden is able to withstand all of the onsets of all the chemical releases and everything else that's going on, and other seeds that we have, like all of the heirloom seeds and things that are struggling and what have you, because of the onset of the chemicals and stuff. And then all of a sudden, the only seeds that are viable now are owned by a company who has a patent. Well,
Right.
that's a downward slope as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Oh,
That's already happened in the
100%.
chili world, and it's
I agree.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
So we had Steve Croft on, and he is involved with Penn State University, and they believe they found a cure for colon cancer involved with hemp. And this is like a 3 or 4 year study. But all the results are coming back on their end that they have the cure for colon cancer.
Freaking awesome.
And that was pretty amazing. I mean, I was like, "This is breaking news." I mean, yeah, everybody, food is our medicine, right? And we got to start. Everybody has to start taking that method, because everybody's trying to do too much. Our answers are right with us. We just got to, start implementing it in a different kind of way. Now, gardening with disabilities and growing your own food, I think that's a big issue.
Yeah.
Because everybody should be able to grow their own food.
Yeah.
But how about the people that can't?
Yeah, exactly. How will they get in the garden to be able to grow healthier food options? Because when you're in a wheelchair, or if you can't walk, or if you have issues with your arms, whatever, it makes it very difficult to be able to, I mean, then you're stuck. What do you do then? So
in therapy in a garden, especially when you have these.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I've actually done that at the school garden, and most of the students that actually came out to the garden were special needs students, and a few of them in wheelchairs. And it's easier than you think. The key is that you need to plan and design a garden to make that happen. Too many people just do the traditional garden with long rows in ground, and it isn't until later in life, like some of us are reaching, you realize you can't tend to the garden the way you used to. If you begin the plan with the understanding that there are mobility issues, that there are health issues, then it's actually easier than they would imagine. I spaced the beds at the school garden far enough apart specifically for wheelchairs to be able to get around to all corners of a bed and then move to another row. The height was designed specifically so that a student in a wheelchair could roll up to the bed and then reach into the bed to sow seeds, to tend to the plants, to harvest. I'm now experimenting with some tall beds, 32 inches high, so that there's no bending over at all, and the beds are sturdy enough that you can actually use the bed as a support, assuming that the gardener might have to use a walker or a cane. So yes, I think the traditional methods make it difficult, but I think with just a little thinking and planning and education, gardens can be accessible to just about everybody.
Tony?
Yeah, I agree with Scott. I think the biggest issue you have is that, look, I personally, I think we need to protect our farmers and things like that first, because they are feeding the nation, and not everybody has the time, the ability, or even the desire to grow their own food. So, with that in mind, we need to protect farmers. I mean, there's a massive attack going on with the farmers at the moment, where they want to do these programs about rewilding and stuff, and I understand how important rewilding is and everything else and looking after the planet, but you've got to feed the population first. And maybe that's where they're looking at these GMO seeds, or well, we can get a higher yield with this, so you don't need to grow on as much land and we can rewild. But then again, that's all about the control, which is what I don't like, so. But when it comes back to the disabled gardens, like Scott's saying, you can get them beds up high, and maybe you're not going to be growing everything, like beans, but there are dwarf versions of those you can grow. So there's no reason that if somebody is disabled, with the foresight and the planning and everything else, that you shouldn't be able to grow some sort of food.
Sean?
So yeah, I agree. The planning aspect, I'm in my early 40s. I've still got a little while, hopefully, before I'm old that I'll be in a wheelchair. But regardless, I've still planned out my garden in a way that I know I'm going to be here for a long time. I've got 3 greenhouses. I've got a polytunnel. My greenhouses all have staging. I don't grow on the floor. I get asked about that all the time on my channel. Why am I not growing from the floor? Because number one, I want to save my back right now. I don't want to be bending over, but at the same time, I want to enjoy my plants. And I know that if I ever am, unfortunate enough to be in a wheelchair or have that sort of disability, I want to be able to still enjoy my plants. And it is about planning forward for that. But the other side as well, it's not always physical disabilities that we've got to consider. And I think, a lot of the time, I'm sure you guys have seen this in your channels or your people in your space on YouTube. Sometimes we overcomplicate things a little bit, and sometimes just going back to basics, because growing is at its heart very simple, right? We've been doing it for hundreds of thousands of years. And I find myself overcomplicating things a little bit now and then as well. I did create a series on my channel. It's a beginner's guide to growing chilies, which I try and keep things as simple as possible, step by step. Don't overcomplicate it, because you can overcomplicate anything, right? We always are trying to optimize how we're growing, optimize all the little things we're doing, but that can sometimes alienate people that maybe don't have the capacity for learning that we maybe do. And it's good to just take that into account and just approach it from a simplistic way, right? It's as simple as putting a seed in the soil, covering it over, watering it enough. It doesn't have to be too complicated. So I think we need to consider that as well.
I think that's quite important as far as our channels go as well, considering what the actual viewer wants, because we can all get carried away with all the newest tech or what we've built or whatever the case being, and I'm guilty of that. But getting back to basics is a good thing, I think.
Yeah. Mary?
Perfect. Actually, that's it. Sean beat me to it, is keeping it simple. 2 weeks ago, I went live and I discussed containers and grow bags. And that was specifically because I asked my mostly feral gardeners group, what do you want to learn more about and what do you struggle with in your garden? And one of them was, I'm disabled, and how do I grow with a disability? And so we did containers and we did grow bags. They're simple to use. They're easy to set up. You don't have to grow everything. You can start with something simple as a tomato or lettuce. And that keeping it simple for people that either struggle to learn or don't have access to everything. And in my earlier before I got started with Mary's Heirloom Seeds, I had my own physical disability from a car accident. So I had no use of my right feeling in my fingers, but I can still manage a wheelbarrow. I don't have a tractor to do all of my gardens. So a lot of it is just keeping it simple, keeping your space clear so that if you know, I don't have a wheelchair or anyone in a wheelchair, but for the schools that I've gone to, the beds were higher, the space in between was wider because either you've got kids with disabilities or you just want to make it so the teachers that are having to do most of the upkeep on it or over the weekends or over the summer, they can access it without having to hurt their backs, their knees, and everything else. So all around the look of your garden, the space of your garden, and then keeping it simple is really important. Just and not even if you're disabled, but if you're just getting started and we overcomplicate it, which we all can because we have so much experience. You don't want to have somebody just throw in the towel because they're watching your channel and they're like, okay, I'm done. That's enough.
Right. Well, I mean, the gardening thing is not just your physical disability, what you see on the outside, but a lot of people also have mental disabilities as well. So having a garden for someone that has a mental disability, you know, mental disabilities can range huge from like PTSD to severe anxiety, depression, whatever you got. You go out there and you garden and you kind of forget about all that and it kind of just goes away and you feel better. And so gardening can help with.
I was going to mention,
Yeah,
I have a patron that.
Oh,
sorry.
Go ahead, Sean. You first, and then Gardner Scott.
So I have a patron, one of the members in my community that reached out to me to let me know how much gardening, I mean, he said off the back of my channel, but he started growing chilies off watching some of my videos, how much it helped him. He's a veteran and he's based out in Canada, and he was having suicidal thoughts, and it was really tough for him for about a year, 2 years after he came back from service. And he started growing chilies and other plants as well. And he said it saved his life, right? I think part of it was just having something to look forward to, right? And it is that slowing down of things and just, looking after something. And it changed everything for him. And you're right. It's not just about looking for ways that our gardens can help people with disabilities in terms of getting around. But it's about also helping them not solve their problems, but help them with those sort of issues that they face. So it's a very powerful thing.
Yeah, I think it's helpful if we expand what we think of as a garden. Too often we focus on gardening as being growing carrots and peas and beans and melons. At the school garden, I specifically designed one section as a sensory garden, and there were plants for all 5 senses. And in the area that was devoted to sound, I had a very small bubbling rock fountain. And around it, I had pollinator plants that attracted the buzzing insects. It was my favorite part of the garden. But some of the students that would come to the larger garden, our primary focus was to grow food for the school. But we had students that had disabilities. They were unable to communicate verbally, and they would lash out very violently with teachers. And they were very difficult students in the classroom. But when they came to the garden, it was a complete reversal. And one student in particular who really was seen as a troubled child would come to that sensory garden and just sit with his finger in the water and listen to the sound of the insects. And he would touch some of the lamb's ear, the soft plants I had nearby. And when we focus on your point, Corky, that there is a mental aspect to gardening as well, it's easier than you think. And, I agree with Mary and Sean. It can be very simple. It can be simply a water fountain in the garden that can give that calm and that comfort to someone who is troubled. And if we move beyond the food production, gardens really are a magical place.
Yeah. I loved your answer because my son is autistic. And so just the sensory garden in general is just like kind of brought tears to my eyes a little bit. Like, that's so great.
Now, one of the biggest issues is glyphosate. 80% of the people, at least in the US, have glyphosate in their bodies. We interviewed this lady, I forgot her name offhand, but she's known as the glyphosate fact finder. You know, I mean, you got the fact finder for glyphosate. I mean, wow, what interview that was. And I can't believe 80% of the people have it in their bodies. From drinking beer, wine, soda, your cereals. And
it really hit me hard when they said it was in wine. That just like, that hit me hard. Because I can't find organic wine anywhere.
Doesn't even mean organic is safe these days, though, does it? You know,
No.
You know, I know of a farm not so far away who used to use glyphosate. It had a change of ownership, and 2 years later, that ground was dedicated as organic, and the produce was sold out of it as organic. And to me, they were able to get the organic symbol from government and everything else based on what they were doing, and no foresight had been given to what the land was previously used for before allocating that out to them. So you can't even be sure with organic anymore.
Nope.
It's a shame.
That's a shame. That's horrible. That's lying to people, basically.
Yeah. But for the guy who owns the farm, he is organic. He grows in an organic way and everything else. But again, you know, it can take a long time it's an accumulative thing. So it can take a long time for that to work out to the soils and stuff. So those plants are uptaking that.
Yep.
That could take over 10, 20 years. It's forever chemical, you know?
Yeah, it's not great, is it?
No, not at all. Gardner Scott?
So the reason that glyphosate is so prevalent in our bodies is because of the GMOs that the industrial agriculture are using, where it's been inserted into the genetics. And so we're not going to get away from that. If you're using or eating any fried product, it's probably, at least in the United States, it's being made from the rapeseed, the canola oil, and it's going to have it in it, as will much of the corn and everything else we're eating. All we can do, I think, to control whether we approve of it or not is how we use it in our own gardens. And if you use glyphosate, you read the directions and you follow what you're supposed to do, and you can use it safely. If you don't want to use it and you want to grow organically, then grow organically. I don't use any chemicals in my garden because I think nature provides all of the corrective actions that I need to control the pests and the weeds and everything else. So, you know, this is a much larger issue. There's nothing any of us will be able to do individually to get it out of our food, because it's already there and it's going to be there. It's just a choice of whether we do it in our garden or not.
Sean?
You know, I sell my hot sauces and stuff like that. There's no way I'm going to be using anything that could be even potentially risky in my garden. And, you know, the way I approach it, I'm fortunate enough to have a decent amount of space where I live. I was able to wild an area, so got a bit of wilding going on. And honestly, the biggest pest that I have is aphids and whitefly with the chilies. And we have so many hoverflies and ladybugs around that it takes care of it. There's a small problem in the wintertime where I use, again, probably not ideal, but it's better than some things. I use some neem oil. So it's just trying to find those alternatives. But my ideal situation is just use nature. And, you know, if you can attract those bugs, if you can attract things like those hoverflies, it works wonders. There's never a problem with aphids since I've seen hoverflies there. And, you know, using companion plants like, what are we using at the moment? So French marigolds, that's mainly what I'm growing. I always have a few of those around the greenhouses. Fantastic for attracting hoverflies. And they look great as well. And they smell good. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I think as well with gardening, that people, they tend to get rid of all of the plants that are really beneficial to insects, things like nettles and stuff like that, you know, because they are massive food sources, but it's one of the plants that most insects will lay their eggs on, and
Yeah.
we'll just yank them out of the garden without giving them a second thought. So sometimes we can cause our own issues within the garden just by not thinking forward and realizing that there's a benefit to these plants.
I did a video. It was like a really short video on the Pennsylvania smartweed and how good it is. Like, it doesn't look like it's anything, but aphids are more likely to attack that because it's really sweet versus the stuff in your garden. So if you have the Pennsylvania smartweed in your garden or on the sides of your beds or whatever, keep it instead of weed whacking it down, because it's gonna benefit your garden more than anything. And I didn't even know. All I did was like, what is this? And I took a picture of it and I did some research, and it's like, that's so cool. Like, I'm keeping
The
this.
sturgeons are just as good here, you know.
Yeah.
They work really well.
Okay, go ahead, Mary.
So while some people are pulling up those nettles, I'm intentionally planting them around in different places of my garden, because I also understand the medicinal benefits of some of the things that a lot of people just spray or pull, or, you know, I feed them to my chickens too when I pull some of these things up. But has anybody watched or seen the video of the guy? I think it was I'm pretty sure it was the man who created Roundup. And he said this was years ago. He said, it's so safe you can drink it. And somebody said, well, would you like to drink it? And he looks over and he's like, I'm not stupid. So I will have to find that. I will have to find that video for you guys, because I thought it was the best. Here you have this man who's selling it and promoting it, and he says it's so safe you can drink, but he wouldn't drink it. And I have not just an in the middle outlook on herbicides and pesticides. I have a complete anti. I don't spray. I don't treat. I use companion planting in my garden. My father was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease back in 2001 and 21, excuse me. And when I start doing more research on it, I didn't know hardly anything about it when we got everything started. There is a factor of exposure to harmful chemicals that may contribute to Parkinson's and also may make it worse. And I look back at all of the exposure that he's had. People spray all sorts of chemicals on their grass because you want a beautiful grass. I don't, but in general, the thinking is you want this pretty green grass. My father's been a surfer for close to 65 years. He surfs in the water the day after it rains. And when you look out in the ocean, you have a giant bloom of brown. And it's because the water comes straight off the road. He's in Southern California, so they don't get a ton of rain like we do here in Texas. And that water comes straight off the road. It comes straight off of your gardens, off of your grass, and it goes right into the ocean, and those people surf in the water. One of the more famous surf shapers that I also grew up with, who was a friend of my father, he also died from Parkinson's disease. And you look at some of these people and some of the diseases we have that may be avoided, or at least have less occurrence in our societies, in our population. And you look and you wonder how much the application of some of these harmful herbicides and pesticides that people don't even think about when they use. I'm wondering, I always look at it as how much is that contributing to it? So it's definitely not something I would grow in my garden. And it's definitely something that I teach people how they can avoid it by doing things like companion planting, like Sean mentioned.
I was going to say one thing you mentioned about the grass. One of the best companion planting that I've done here. We've just moved here about 3 years ago. I spread clover seed everywhere on my grass, and
So did I.
wow, what a difference! But you get green grass all year round. Plus, the dogs, when they pee on clover, it doesn't go brown, and it's fantastic for the insects. There's some beautiful little flowers. Yeah,
and clover is great because it's not only a nitrogen fixer, but it's also it can I'm forgetting the word I'm thinking of now, but it's good for getting rid of disease in the soil as well, so so it's good.
And it's fantastic for compost when we are mowing the lawn and bringing that down, including the clover. It's not just grass that I'm composting, it's the clover as well. It just creates so many more nutrients.
Are you talking about the little white clover, the Dutch?
No, the little like 4-leaf clover type thing.
Oh, okay.
You get different types. Yeah.
Red, white, there's lots of different types. Yeah.
Oh, there's plenty of different ones.
Biofumigant as well. See.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
No. But the best thing is, that you never need to feed your soil. You never need to feed your grass. There's people that are spraying out nitrogen onto their grass every year. If you've got clover there, it's automatically pushing that nitrogen back into the soil.
Yep.
Now, cover crops, there's a huge push finally in New Jersey, at least, for cover crops. And which is fascinating because now it's out to the farmers. Now it's starting to get out to the public. So a lot of questions are about cover crops right now, which is fascinating, which is where we should be in the first place.
Speaking of clover.
Yeah. That was really good. We moved right into the topic that we were going to talk about. That's great.
So what other cover crops have you guys used? Do you guys use it in your beds? What's going on around your area? Are people using cover crops? I'd love to know. So Gardener Scott?
Oh, yeah. I have a number of videos on cover crops, how to plant them, how to harvest them. And I like using cover crops. Clover is ideal as a cover crop, especially as a lawn replacement. I don't have grass anymore. That was one of the first things I did when I moved into this house a little over 4 years ago, like Sean and Mary were talking about. I got rid of my lawn completely and turned it into a sustainable landscape. Yeah. But as far as the cover crops, I don't think enough people do them. And there are so many options. One of the cover crops I use in my open garden area is daikon radish, because my soil is so compacted and so dense that I'm planting areas with the daikon radishes as a precursor to working in that area in the years ahead to form new garden beds. It's breaking apart the soil. I love hairy vetch. In my area, hairy vetch flowers earlier than just about anything except dandelions. And so the hairy vetch is not only adding nitrogen to the soil, it's covering the soil over the winter into the spring, but it's providing that nectar and pollen for the insects early on. And then, of course, later in the year, I use the winter peas and the winter wheat and things like that I'll turn into the soil in spring. But I think I'm not going to be the only one that recommends cover crops. The key is just educating others so that more gardeners begin using the cover crops.
Tony?
Yeah, so I primarily use 4 cover crops, and I use them every year for the last 13 years. So if you have any, bare soil through the growing season, I always sow a clover in that. Like I said earlier, it's a biofumigant, and it is also a legume, so it'll pull in that nitrogen into the soil rather than weeds growing there. And the thing with clover is it will die off quickly on the onset of winter. So through winter then, I'll always use hairy vetch, field beans and ryegrass. Excuse all the noise here. The hairy vetch and the field beans are fantastic. Now I use these crops mainly so that they stop the compaction, the root systems will penetrate quite deeply, and they're also fixing nitrogen for me. But they're fantastic for protecting our soil over winter. But unlike a lot of people who will dig those in, because I'm primarily a no-dig gardener, I'll hoe them off the top of the ground, and all of that foliage is then becoming an ingredient in my compost base. The root systems are left in the ground. They will rot down and allow waterways and air paths and things like that in order to build a structure of the soil, so that I'm getting a twofold out of my green manure. All the work has been done at soil level. It's kept all the microbes alive all winter, which is what I'm all about. And then all the green, or all the foliage off the top of it, all gets taken, and then it's included in my compost bins at a time, I might add, that there's not a lot of green around to add to a compost bin, because primarily around the time that you want to terminate that crop, you have no other greens. It's all browns that you have, so it's a fantastic source to get that compost kicked off as well.
I had never even thought about a cover crop until I started talking to you. And then we talked to, I can't remember, someone else who started doing them as well. And I'm like, it's just blown my mind. Like, this next year, I'm having cover crops in all my raised beds. I was afraid at first because I didn't want to plant something that was going to get out of control, that would cause me more work. And
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
what I was afraid of. And
the root systems of some of them can be quite tough, but at the very worst case, you just get like a weed whacker with a blade on and just take it straight back to the ground level. Once you've taken the heads off them, these crops will die anyway. And you just literally take that stuff if you don't want to dig it in. Things like ryegrass, which I also use, that's a little bit harder to terminate. But like I said, if you've got a bladed whacker, you could just go straight through, take the top off that, and it very rarely will it resprout. So and the ones with really strong root systems, like the rye and the field beans and things like that, they're fantastic for opening them, breaking that soil down. Especially like Scott said with the daikon radish, it does the exact same thing. They're penetrating down. You terminate that, and you've got this huge root then that's rotting in the ground, opening up massive air pockets and things like that in the ground that the plants will love.
Sean?
So yeah, the clover, obviously, which I actually didn't get rid of the grass. It's in amongst the grass. Most people worry it's going to, I don't know. I think the advertising back in the day for these glyphosates and things like that, the pesticides weed killers supposedly, did a great job in saying that clover was weeds, and that's gotten to people's minds, and they think that things like clover are just going to take over your grass. It doesn't. They work in tandem. But yeah, there's that. But the other thing I've been trying this year is actually carrots. I found that it really helps out my raised beds. So we get a ton of rain. It's been pretty much nonstop raining here since November. It's insane. And some of my beds are not looking the best. I'm going to have to turn them over a bit because they've really compacted down. But the two beds that I left a bunch of carrots to just grow, I mean, they've been growing all year last year. In between my other plants, I just had these carrots going. They were still growing now. Pulled them out, and the amount of worms that are in that ground is amazing. The soil is looking healthy. It's loose. It's beautiful stuff. And the other benefit is I use some of the carrots. I just chop them up and throw them into my long-term compost. But some of them as well, we have muntjacs, so these tiny little deer that come through our garden. Leave them in a pile and they eat them. There's some roe deer around our way as well. They love the carrots. So it's
have you
a few
ever thought
positives.
about using carrots in some of your hot sauce?
These carrots I would not be eating. They're
No?
massive. They're huge. They just taste like wood.
The root fly will be in them, I'm sure.
It's huge. But amazing, the root system, how much it does spread, the carrot. I mean, obviously it's got the main root, but it spreads out. And when you're pulling that out, it just automatically, the soil is just beautiful. It's perfect for planting.
Yeah, that's really
and again,
cool.
you're keeping all of those microbes and the worms and everything fed throughout winter. It's
exactly so many
good.
worms. I love vermicomposting, and to me, this here, I mean, if I throw in a couple of these carrots into my vermicompost bins, they would love that as well. But at the same time, it's like I've got a natural vermicompost area with these carrots. It's pretty cool.
Neat.
I could imagine Tony's carrots. Tony's carrots going to look like
I know.
large
They're freaking-
watermelons.
they're gonna be huge. He has like the perfect vegetables, including
I'll
his
send you some
massive
photos after,
supply of
Joe.
potatoes. I'm so jealous of your potatoes.
Mary?
So I didn't pull up my grass either, but if there's one thing I really despise is having to cut the grass or having to do anything with it, because I'd much rather just deal with garden spaces. So we did the same with clover, but when we moved to our property, it's 3 years now, there was a big empty bare soil, and so we did so many different varieties of 3 or 4 different varieties of clover. We had white Dutch, medium red clover, crimson clover. So I literally just tossed as much as I could out there. And then as far as primarily my gardens for food and for seeds here are in raised beds, because we've got gophers and chickens, and I can hear the neighbor's rooster behind me. So we've got so much wildlife here. We've got wild hogs and deer. So most of our raised beds, we did daikon radish, like Gardener Scott mentioned. I did different types of radish just because I have access to old seeds that I don't sell. So whatever I'm not going to use for customers, I've got in my own garden. We even did a bed of lettuce. So this year I want to test the soil health in, say, what I did clover versus lettuce versus beans, so that I can see over time if that is beneficial or if it's just taking up space, really. But I did what Tony does, and I just trim it at the soil line. If I don't put it in my compost, I feed it to my chickens or feed it to the neighbors' chickens, wherever they are, and it still goes to good use. But at least we're keeping it covered on the soil. Where we are, we don't we don't get a lot of snow. We don't get a long period of winter time. So there's something green growing almost year round here. I actually did a lot of rutabagas as a cover crop this year, just because I had more rutabaga than turnip this year. So that's what I did. And the soil, when I pulled it up, like you mentioned, I pulled up this rutabaga and it was covered in earthworms. So it's definitely doing its job by keeping the soil healthy.
I told my husband that I wanted to grow turnips. I have 2.5 acres, and my back field, I told him I wanted to grow turnips. So I was going to buy like 15,000 turnip seeds and just like grow them in the back, And he's like, no. And now, with all this cover crop talk, like, he's so into it. He's like, we're going to do radishes in the fall. Like, he's really into it. So I might convince him
when you're ready, let me know. Send me an email and I'll send you a bunch of different seeds you can try out as different cover crops. But the daikon radish is definitely, we've got heavy clay soil. Daikon radish works really well. The turnips work really well. And if you don't like turnips, if you've got livestock, it's free food for them. So there's always a way you can use it, or throw it in your compost.
Yeah. So one of the things we've been researching, soil on our channel.
I know, you have educated me so much, by the way, Joe. You're like a great host / like educator, because I have learned so much about the soil, and it's amazing. It's blowing my mind. So thank you for that.
Thank you. So one of the main things is using biochar and compost together. Do you guys use biochar? And what do you guys think of it? So start with Gardener Scott.
Yeah, I use it not as much as I used to. I actually partnered with a couple biochar companies in my past. There's a New Jersey company. About 15 years ago, I did some home garden research for them, just to see how biochar worked in the garden. And then at the school garden, I partnered with a rancher from Kansas who was trying to develop a bone char, biochar made out of the cattle bones that were the result of his slaughtering operation. And it's one of those things. I have a couple of videos on biochar, of course, because of all of that. I'm a big fan of it. There's again a misconception as to charcoal versus biochar, and there really is a difference. Biochar is produced in a process called pyrolysis, and it removes all of the oils and all of the resins and all the chemicals, and basically all that's left behind is just the carbon shell, and that carbon is the repository for microbes and water and nutrients. And it's, in my own tests in the garden, it's very beneficial for poor soil and for developing soil. So if you want to build a good soil, biochar does help set a foundation. But once the soil is rich, once you have all those microbes, once you have all that soil life, then biochar kind of loses its effectiveness, because the soil as a whole is able to hold all the microbes and the nutrients and the water. And the role of biochar is actually reduced in a very healthy soil.
Tony?
Yeah, and with Scotch here, I think people, like I said, they mistake charcoal for biochar, and Scott explained it really well with the pyrolysis. But if you consider like your biochar is like a tower block with all these little rooms in, because it's so porous, when people just put it into bare soil, it's no good to you because it's not charged. And I think this is the biggest issue people have. And if you're producing a real poor compost, even by adding it to the compost, it's not really going to charge it enough. So my favorite way of charging biochar then would be with a compost tea, using like a worm castings or something like that. It'd be fantastic for charging this, and then utilizing that. But again, like Scott says, once your soil's good, or once you got it in it, because biochar doesn't, it's not something that gets consumed because it's pure carbon, and it will stay in your soils for good, like, and once it's in there, the microbial life that you have, and this is why you see a diminishing effect when you start getting good soils, because the microbial life that you have in those soils are already charged that biochar, and are utilizing those spaces within its porous structure. So it's really good. But if you're going to use it to build soil, you really need to charge it, and charge it with whatever you put in is what you're going to get out of it. And that's all I can really say about it, to be honest with you.
I mean, I really think it's great for growing peppers. I mean, if you use vermicomposting, with the other compost adding on with the biochar for growing hot peppers specifically, I think that's a great combo. Because a lot of people grow peppers, they never grow that, even like a regular bell pepper. They're small, If you could keep those nutrients right there, and you're growing hot, sweet or hot peppers, you're going to have some healthy pepper plants. And that brings us on to Sean Chili Chump.
So I don't use biochar. It's not something I have used yet. I have been wanting to do some experiments with it. I do a lot of soil experiments on my channel, different mixes and that. I have my own soil recipe that I show everyone on my channel. One of the key things, one of the key additions I've made in the last couple of years that I think have been really useful, more so for your raised beds or your permanent gardens, is mycorrhizal fungus. Makes such a difference. And again, it's the same thing, right? You can't just keep adding it every year. It's going to get to a point where you don't need any more, because it spreads its own roots out there, and it actually does its own thing. It grows and it will spread throughout your beds, and you'll have this amazing, beautiful root system that's all helping each other, right? Similar to what the clover does by enriching the soil with some nitrogen, and it helps feed, and it helps encourage all the microorganisms that are going on, right? To give you a nice, healthy soil. But I think one of the things from my perspective, the soil mix that I have, it's a very rich soil mix. I do grow in containers, so I grow in 10-liter or 12-liter buckets most of the time. I have it so that it's very nutrient rich, because obviously, like you've just said, they need a lot of nutrients. But the big thing there is the porosity of the soil. So being able to make sure that the water isn't just going to sit there, because they don't like wet roots. So, one of the amendments that I have, it doesn't have any nutrients. It kind of sounds like biochar, but without the added benefits of the nutrients that are coming along with it and the microorganisms. So I'm using quite a bit of perlite and vermiculite with mine. It creates that porosity, which again helps with all the other things I'm adding in, the fish blood and bone meal that I'm adding in, mixing that into the soil. Again, it's getting inside all the bits and pieces that you've got in there with the compost as well, and it's allowing those nutrients to be available throughout the season. So yeah, I do want to play with biochar. I've heard some good things. It's just a case of when I do something like that, when I want to test something new like biochar, I want to do it properly. I want to do it as an experiment. I don't want it to be anecdotal from my perspective. I want to know this is definitely giving me the results. It's not just because the weather's suddenly been better this year and therefore it's grown better. Now I'm going to say that biochar is the thing to use. So I will test it out. I'm quite keen to see how that works out, especially after your comments there, Joe. It sounds like something I should be doing.
Anytime you can store something right there, and you have that rich soil, it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And
one of my methodologies when it comes to growing chilies is not necessarily treat and mean to get a better crop or hotter chili, but it's more about forcing those roots to just hit the sides. So by not allowing them to have food all the time, not allowing them to have water all the time, they're going to spread to find that. Which I think I've got like 6 videos on my channel saying don't feed your seedlings, right? Because people do that. They go and keep on feeding nutrients and that even after they've got a rich soil. They're feeding the soil even more. They're putting artificial nitrogen in there and things like that. And all that is doing is the root system is going to stay small because it's always available. So yes, you've got to have it always available, but you first got to have that big root system that allows the plant itself to spread out, fill up that entire pot, and then you can feed the hell out of it, right? Once it is at that stage.
Mary?
All right, so similar to Sean, I don't use it, but it's definitely in the works of something that I would like to add. Our latest garden project, which is why I'm inside, is in the works as we speak. We've got a new garden space, and that will be a little more of an experiment. So it'll have a lot more beds and a lot more space for me to kind of figure out what I like to do. But for me, I'm starting with a very healthy soil in the first place. So there's a lot I haven't had to add or experiment with. So it's definitely in the list of things to do, but not necessarily something that I've used here on this current property.
It's funny talking about.
If I could
I got it in my pocket.
If I can stress Tony's point, because I think that's the most important aspect. And for both Sean and Mary, I encourage that you do test beds with biochar because it really is amazing. The worst producing beds, the plants that did the worst in my tests were the ones that had uncharged biochar. The biochar that was just thrown in dry in and mixed with the soil, those did absolutely worst. It was the charging, that induction of all the microbes that really does make the difference. But try some beds without charging it so that you have that comparison, and it's incredibly dramatic to see the results.
Can I just add one thing before we finish on this topic? Because we've all been talking about what biochar can add, but we're not talking about what it can take away as well. Because one thing, if I was at home now, you would have seen all the house plants behind me. I grow a lot of aroids at home, and they're always grown in a soilless mix. There is never any soil in that room, and biochar can be used to absorb all of the extra phosphorus and things like that from when you're feeding those soilless mixes, and it will absorb that, and you can use that in which to take away. It can be used like a cleaning agent as well for your soils. So it's really how you want to use it. So we're talking about charging it first now for our vegetables, because we want to be able to put the good microbial life in there to put in the soil. But if what's happening with the biochar that they're not charging and putting in the soil, that's absorbing all of the nutrients out of that soil, which is why those beds tend to be poor. So you can use it as a sponge as well. And that's what I do at home with all the aroids and things. So it's important to understand what you want to do with it and then work with it to get the results that you want.
It's amazing when you talk about microbes in a garden, how important they are to our soil food web. And nobody really talks about microbes in the garden and how to add them and how to implement them, and that's so important.
Do you ever think that maybe the science maybe scares people? Like they don't really know, like what is a micro? Like, because your average gardener is going to be like, what's a microbe?
The problem is we get away from the simplicity of gardening, and like we were talking about earlier. But so it tends to be, as you get further down your journey into gardening and you want to learn more, that's when all of this sort of stuff comes in, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it all comes back to just having a healthy compost. Just keep it simple. I think a lot of people when I get asked about like what soil should I use, what compost should I use, I always say, firstly, if you can make it yourself, make it yourself. If you can't and you have to buy it, buy the cheapest one out there. No additives, nothing in there, no fancy writing on the thing. If you can, just a sack of compost that's been made, get that, right? It just needs to be plain and simple. And it's going to have the microbes in there if it's been processed correctly. A lot of the compost we buy has been sterilized. I mean, sterilized, that's great. It means that you're not going to have any errant seeds in there, but it also means you're killing off a lot of the microbes and the beneficial.
Yeah. And you see a lot of people sterilizing their soils and stuff too.
I don't get it. I'd rather pick out a couple weeds.
Like, oh, I was cooking this up in my kitchen. I'm like, what are you doing?
I'm working so hard to get the microbes there, and then people are like just nuking them to death. I think, what are you doing?
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing with seed saving too. Everybody's washing everything off the seed, and then there's microbes are actually on a seed. That's what you want. That's what you want to start with, not wash them off.
Right.
Now we're talking about all this success. What is your biggest success story in a garden, and what's your biggest failure in the garden? Start with Gardener Scott.
I think my biggest success is the fact that my granddaughters love coming into my garden and want to participate. I unlike the stories that you've told in the past, and I know Tony dedicated his recent book to his grandfather. I didn't have that growing up. I didn't have grandparents that gardened. My parents didn't garden. Unlike Sean and Mary, the idea of living on or near a farm was distant for this kid who grew up in the city. And so being able to share what I've learned over these decades with a whole generation, and specifically my granddaughters, I think is just incredible. And now my son's kids are getting old enough. I just visited them a couple of weeks ago, and we built a raised bed together. And my grandson, 3 years old, wanted to be part of the process. So to me, that's a success. Being able to pass on, what I have in the little way that I'm doing it, so that my grandkids can benefit. I can't think of any plant I've grown or anything I've built in the garden that even compares to the future that these kids have for them, because they were exposed to gardening. And then as far as the failures, I don't think there is a biggest failure. I think failure is part of gardening. That's one of the things I like about gardening, because every failure is an educational opportunity. And so all of this information stored in my brain has come about mostly from the failures along the way, because I experimented and it didn't work, or I just tried a new seed, or I tried a new watering method, or I thought maybe I could grow in Colorado and that it wouldn't hail after a thunderstorm. All of these things have happened. And so I don't think we should focus on single failures. I like to focus on multiple failures that lead us to a point that we can modify what we're doing and have more success. There still will be failures, but at least we can highlight some of the successes we have along the way.
Tony?
Yeah, so like Scott's saying, you know, I think we learn far more from failing than we ever do by succeeding at something. But my biggest failure, I actually turned into my biggest success. And so it's one in the same for me, and that is potatoes. And about 15, 20 years ago, I couldn't grow potatoes for love nor money. And the reason for that was where we live, we have a massive issue with wireworm. And they just bore holes through the potatoes. They leave in these black lines right through them that totally destroy the potato from inside out. And then that got me learning from my mistakes of planting them in the soil in the first place. And that's what set me down the path of container growing for potatoes. And that is how I got to doing what I'm doing now, to where, you know, I'm pulling out 450 pound of potatoes a year out of containers. And it's funny because it not only was it my worst issue, it became my biggest success, because now I'm known all over the internet for growing these potatoes. And so just because you fail at something, like Scott said, it's a massive learning opportunity, and it actually drives you to find a solution. And those are the times that you learn there. And once you learn, you know, something, you can move on to the next failure so that you can succeed at that as well. And it's
I'm
just
a
a
huge
continuous thing.
planner, and do you know what I could do with all those potatoes? I would not have to plant potatoes for a long, long time. It'd be great.
Well, I'd still have to plant them. I got videos to make, you know.
Yeah.
Sean?
I think a biggest success, beyond obviously what results from me doing my YouTube thing and seeing some of the awesome comments and emails I get, I think closer to home, my wife, she's never had a plant longer than a month before it died. And the fact that she's outside right now doing my gardening jobs while I'm doing this, it's incredible
have
to me.
Come down and teach Tina, mate.
But she loves being in the garden. She actually asks to go out there, from somebody that's never really grown anything in her life before to now loving. And we live on a small holding here. This is a town girl. She's never lived out, you know, on a farm or anything like that, and she loves the life. So that, you know, I think it is infectious when you are passionate about something, and the fact that she has picked up on that and she's getting involved with me, that probably I'd say is my biggest success. Failure, I agree with Tony and Scott. You know, I'm pretty sure Mary's going to say the same thing. You know, failures, I don't see them as failures. It's a learning experience, and like Tony said, you learn far more from a failure than you do from success. You know, anybody can get lucky and be successful. It's the failures that make you realize, you know, I purposefully try and fail. You know, so my nutrient mix that I use, I've created my own nutrient mix now. You know, going overboard in nitrogen, what is that going to do? Going overboard in phosphorus, what is that going to do? You know, and actually purposefully trying to fail teaches you a lot more. If I just go with, I'll just go with the tomato feed to feed my chilies, or I'll go with something that I've seen online and I'll go with those averages, that's not really teaching me where the problems might be. And purposefully failing sometimes, I think that helps you to succeed even better later on. So
I fail a lot.
So you must be awesome. You must be doing
That's right.
That's what it's about, though.
Lots of potential growth.
Mary?
I do feel similar. I don't know how many times I've told my customers and viewers that every failure, or what you might consider a failure in the garden, is an opportunity to learn. And maybe you do things different, maybe you do things the same, and figure out. My biggest success, actually, it seems moved into a new house last year, and she had an entire area designated just for a garden. And your viewers don't know my mom, and she's very much a buy your food from the grocery store, and that's where it comes from. And girls, and we all grow food, and most of us have chickens, and we make things from scratch, and we grow gardens, and that wasn't how my mom was raised, and it wasn't how she raised us. So it was kind of a victory moment when my mom says, okay, what do I plant here? And how many garden beds can I put in this space in her new garden, in her new house? And so I think the number was 8 of the very tall metal raised beds, because she doesn't want to be bending over. She thought ahead and said, oh, I can't bend over and pull weeds in this area. So I think they're about 2.5 feet tall, something like that. And all week long, she's been posting on social media about the salads that she's harvesting from her garden. And that to me is just, it's amazing.
Yeah.
For someone who's not big on growing, who is kind of like, thought, I wouldn't say it was thinking lesser of someone to grow food, but it just wasn't her thing.
Yeah.
And now that she gets excited about it, it really makes me feel good that she is my biggest success story, and she's my biggest cheerleader. So that's a success for me. As far as an actual failure, was my first year growing in South Florida. So I grew up in Southern California, and I moved to Hollywood, Florida, which is just north of Miami. So it doesn't get much far south in Florida than that. And I thought, I'm going to start a garden. So I planted my garden based on spring, summer, fall in San Diego. And it was the biggest failure I've ever had in a garden. This was well before Marysheirloomseeds, and everything died. And that's because when most of the United States is in the snow, in South Florida, they're growing tomatoes and peppers and squash and all the amazing things that you can grow, because summertime is bug time. Basically, there's very few really heat tolerant vegetables that you can grow in some areas if you have no shade, very little space, and lots of bugs. So learning timing at that point was super important, and a learning experience, because now I can tell my Florida customers that there's a completely different schedule for Florida planting versus Ohio, Texas, California.
Yeah.
And I love your guides on your site, by the way, Mary. You have everything from every single region, all the way down from Central Florida to South Florida. And, I love that. I love seeing that.
And some of that's based on personal experience. Some of that's based on customers. I've got customers in Alaska that have helped me add timing for my Alaska planting guide, because I don't live in Alaska. So it's definitely helpful to get some feedback from customers and viewers.
Now, planting. We all have our things. We have the green thumb, as you could say, where whatever we put in the ground, it just explodes. Never had a problem ever. Like tomatoes, peppers, eggplant for me, never had an issue. But what are some of the vegetables that you had a problem with that it took a long time for you to grow? Gardner Scott.
Well, my garden is at 7,000 feet elevation in Colorado, very short growing season. And the plants that grow in Texas, I can't grow here, but I keep trying. So okra, for instance, is one of those plants. I had mixed success with sweet potatoes, but it's trying to expand my season by growing plants that don't do well. I haven't tried a full-size watermelon yet because I think that's just wasting too much of my time. But it's generally trying to grow plants that everybody says can't be grown in a region like mine, and just stretching the limits every season to try to figure out if there's a way that I can get a complete harvest in some of those kind of plants that Florida and Texas and Georgia and Louisiana and all the southern US states are able to do. I can't, but I'm trying.
Tony?
So my Achilles heel are loganberries. Now I can get the plants to grow like triffids; they get massive. But do you think I can get them to fruit? I just can't get them fruiting at all. Loganberries. So like I said, I've had these plants now. I got 6 of them. They're in a row in my fruit tent, in my fruit cage, and they've been in 3 different locations in the garden, and they never amounted to much. I moved them to where they are now, and they grew massively, and they just will not fruit for me. And I don't know why that is. I still haven't figured it out. I will figure it out one day, but they just way down on the list of things to worry about in the garden, like, you know.
Sean?
So obviously I focus on chilies. So treating every other vegetable like a chili works sometimes. Unfortunately, it didn't work with my cabbages, which I quickly realized needs not an acidic soil, but an alkaline soil. And what a difference. Just again, it's one of those experiments I did. First year I grew them, cabbages were just rubbish. Second year, I decided, well, let me amend the soil a little bit, make it a little bit more alkaline. And what a difference, because I still grew my others in my old method. And it's, yeah, I should read Tony's vegetable books a bit more often, I think. But it's little things like that. Unfortunately, you know, my focus is on chilies. I grow like 800-900 varieties, and you know, I love growing vegetables as well, and I have my raised beds for that. And like I said, most of the time, acidic soil or slightly acidic soil works well for the majority of what we're growing. But cabbages, no. And the best thing is I'm surrounded by fields of cabbages. It should grow. But,
looking over the fence, drooling.
well, we walk around our area. We take our dog for a walk, and every now and then, especially during the harvesting season, some of the trucks, when they're going a little bit quick around corners, they'll lose a few cabbages off the top. So we call that roadkill. We end up coming home with a few of those. So we get some free cabbages every now and then.
Mary?
I'd have to say carrots were my nemesis for years. Once you can get them established, generally you're good to go. But for the longest time, just getting them to something that even closely resembled a carrot was difficult. So that was definitely when I saw Corky's like massive carrot. I'm like, oh. But that was probably the most difficult to get once. Now I've got it down, but before it was definitely a struggle.
Yeah, believe it or not, carrots are not really great for me either. For some reason, I just want to grow a crap load of carrots all in one row, just sprinkle and then when I get the carrots, they're like this big. So I have to tell myself to be super patient and just like one carrot at a time, like one seed at a time. Because if not, they're right on top of each other. And I end up getting weird looking
Clay soils are a struggle for carrots, and it's one of the reasons I grew in a raised bed full of sharp sand. And you get fantastic straight carrots every single time out of there. They never fork. So if you have struggled with it, try like a sand bed with a compost core, and that'll really make a big difference.
Yeah, Tony, I loved your video on that, by the way. I loved your bed.
I'll send you the photos from the harvest after the live, so you can see some of them. They never actually made it to a video.
We tried to do a competition. I had Terry King in one of my competitions and Sheepy's allotment. in one of mine, and my carrots didn't even somewhat even touch theirs. But my husband did grow a massive carrot. It was really cool, but nowhere even near the size of what they could do.
That taproot was pretty amazing. You could just going and going and
Yeah, I
going.
can't remember how many inches this was, but it
Yeah,
was huge.
for those with the long tap roots, they're growing them in drain pipes though. So
Yeah.
on a 45-degree angle. So and it's usually done like that for show because you can open that drain pipe up. They basically cut it in half and then tape the two pieces back together. So you can literally take the top off and then clear all the compost from around the actual root. Because for show, like that Terry does in Malvern, the same as I used to, is all about length at that time, or weight. It doesn't matter how it looks.
I tell you, one of the things I always wanted to grow was one of those huge watermelons.
Yeah.
The sugar baby watermelons, no problem. Cantaloupe, no problem. I want to grow one of those huge watermelons.
I'm not doing very good at growing melons, but that's one thing that I'm going to keep trying at because I love them so much. I'm like, I want to grow my own melons, and I'm going to keep trying because they are so good.
Guys, I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to cut this short today. I've
Okay.
got to shoot. I've got something else I need to do. But it's been fantastic being here. So I'll speak to you all very soon, okay?
All right. Thank you
Tony,
so
for
much
spending
for
all
joining
this
me.
time
Great
with
to
us.
see you
Thank
again,
so much.
Tony.
No worries. Bye, guys.
Give
Bye-bye.
our best to your family. Enjoy your
Will
holiday.
do. Thank you. See you soon. Bye, all.
Bye.
Thank you. Tony's a great guy.
He's
He's awesome. So for container gardening is great for peppers and a whole bunch of other vegetables, of course. We all grow certain types for certain ways, but peppers, you go all these contests, everybody's container gardening. I grow mostly in the ground because I can't afford 200 grow bags and a soil with it. I want to know what kind of container mix you put in container gardens, and what kind of fertilizer you use. Gardner Scott.
I'm still experimenting with this, and I'm looking forward to hearing what Sean's mix is. I use a basic blend, starting with 2 parts peat moss to 1 part perlite, and then to that I'll generally add 2 parts compost. I'm using the IV organic fertilizer now to mix in with that. I've experimented with blood meal. There you go. I've experimented with green sand and bone meal, and I've had good success. I think I need to boost the amount of compost that I use to get better success. The issue I have is my summers are just so hot, and the humidity levels in summer might be 8%. If we're lucky, we might get 10% humidity. So it is so dry that the containers grow out very quickly. So I'm confronting a container where I have to have so much organic matter in it that it absorbs and holds the soil because my air is so dry. But I still need it to drain because, like Sean had mentioned earlier, you don't want your roots to be soggy if you've got too much water. So I'm still working on it. My basic blends tend to work pretty well, but I don't consider myself an expert on container gardening yet because I'm still trying to figure out the best mix that works for me.
Sean?
Yes, I use quite a bit more compost than you do, Scott. My basic mix is 10 parts compost, 1 part vermiculite, 1 part perlite, a small scoop, not necessarily 1 part, maybe half a part of Epsom salts. And then I do another half scoop of fish blood and bone meal. And a lot of that's for the calcium. It really helps later on. I mean, this is what people don't understand about calcium. You can't really amend with calcium when the problem shows up. It's too late at that point. So having that up front is good, and obviously you need magnesium for the calcium to be absorbed, so that's why the Epsom salts. And then I'm also adding now another 1 part of my vermicompost. So in the past, I used to use chicken manure as that 1 part, but now it's 1 part of my vermicompost because I have enough of it. So it sounds like quite a strong mix, and that's my final mix. That's what my final pot would be. I've potted up about 3 times at that point. So I wouldn't necessarily use that full mix with young seedlings. I wouldn't put the fish blood and bone or any of the other things like the vermicompost or even the Epsom salts. It would just be pure plain compost and the vermiculite and perlite. That would be it for the seedlings. But once you go to final pot and those root systems are properly developed, then yeah, that's a great mix. And then I don't feed. I don't feed for at least a month, normally longer than that, because that's another problem. That the plant will self-regulate. It'll get to a point where it will need to spread its roots even further into whatever size pot you've gone into. And you got to water it, obviously. But feeding after about a month and a half, that's when you'll start to notice your plants will slow down a little bit. Then you can start a slow regime of feeding. And again, they like nutrients, but you can't feed them too much at a time. You need to keep it somewhat reserved, I would say. But keep it simple if you want. Tomato fertilizer works just fine if you're doing chilies. And tomato fertilizer actually works great for a lot of different vegetables. It's quite a nice one. And at least here in the UK, it's quite cheap. I don't know what it's like over in the US. I do have my own fertilizer mix that I've created. So you could do something similar with things like Master Blend and a mix of a few other things, magnesium, a little bit of calcium maybe. But yeah, you can keep it simple. Tomato feed, maybe some seaweed fertilizer. I make compost tea with the vermicompost. I try and keep it as simple as I can. And yeah, it seems to work. But I love container gardening. And I know you say, Joe, that it gets expensive, and the initial setup does. But if you get decent pots, I'm using the same pots year after year, and it's just, it works well for me. But yeah, that upfront cost is not cheap.
Yeah. Sean, how many pepper plants do you grow total?
This year will be probably the biggest year. Just under 1,000 for this year, but typically about 400 to 600. So it's quite a few. I have an automated system that waters it because there's no way I'm watering 1,000 plants manually. That would take all day every time. But I have a drip system that I use. And that keeps what I like with the drip system is obviously it's easy to regulate how much water I'm giving them. Yeah. But also it means that you don't have any algae growth on the top of your plant. If you are top watering, that's a big risk that you have, especially if you're in a humid environment.
Yeah.
Mary?
So I've set up a couple different types of container gardens. I did a bucket garden just to keep it simple. Like you mentioned, you don't have the upfront funds to spend on that. So since I do a lot of school gardens, I did a bucket garden where 100% of it was recycled buckets. So you don't have to spend a lot of money on it, but it is long term. Sometimes it's better to get a decent container. My container garden mix is fairly simple. I'm going to have to follow Sean's and add more compost in the future, though. That's a lot more compost than I use, but I'm going to try that out now. Like Joe said, put it in your pocket. I use coconut coir for the most part when I'm just getting started with seeds. Since they don't need a lot of fertilizer, I am definitely not putting my seeds in my container garden mix. It's basic. It's compost, perlite, and coconut coir. So not something made.
Oh, she went to get it. I jumped out because she paused for a minute. So I'm like, where did she go?
Whoa.
Yeah, she just disappeared.
I love those seed packets.
Sorry. The mail lady was.
Oh, okay.
Well, male person.
We were talking about containers, right?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
So my container mix is simple. It's compost, perlite, and coconut coir. And then I simply add some mountain flower root boost, which is something that we carry on my website. And it's got beneficial bacteria in it. And it's got some of the stuff that Sean mentioned. It's just not a very high dosage of everything. I think it's a 5-6-2 or something like that. Really simple and not anything. I like to keep my container simple. So.
And Sean, I know this, you don't have this offhand, but what new peppers are you growing this year?
Oh, I do have it on hand.
Perfect.
So actually, for you guys actually on the call as well, I don't know if you've noticed, I don't really do a lot of publicizing of it. I created an application called Seedsio, which allows you to keep track of all your plants. You can go as technical as you want. I use NFC tags, so I can just tap my plant with my phone and it will automatically pop up with whatever that plant is. And then you can take photos of it and make some notes about feeding it or if there's a bug problem or whatever. So that's how I keep track of every one of my plants. They're all numbered. They all got these tags on. So it allows me to really keep track of it. And also when I'm running these experiments to keep hold of that. But anyway, sorry, back to this. That's Seedsio, by the way, seedsio.com if you want to check it out. The plants, so this year I have a few of my own crosses. So I do a lot of crossing of my own chilies, so creating new varieties, sometimes just slight modifications of existing varieties to give some of the qualities that I'm looking for. For example, I've got my own jalapeno, so it's might call it the CC jalapeno, chili chump jalapeno. And it's because we here in the UK, we have a fairly short season and it can be a bit challenging to get decent sized harvest. Jalapeno typically tend to be fairly short season, but having it even shorter season, quicker to germinate. So that's something that I do, making bigger jalapenos. But some of the more exotic, the more interesting ones are that it's awesome to see this happening finally in the chili community. Instead of people just chasing the hottest chili, they are now looking towards pretty chilies. There are some really awesome ones coming out. So variegation is active. The last couple of years, variegation has really taken off. So I've got a couple of varieties, a Foursome that I'm isolating that has its asymmetric leaves. The pods themselves, they're all striped. So the striping on the pods are awesome. It just looks so different, right? I'm not going to get the biggest harvest from it. I'm not going to have the hottest chili, but it just looks amazing. You've got the Sugar Rush Stripey, which again is another one. It looks like a piece of candy.
It does. It does.
Somebody's already crossed that with another chili, and they've created something called the Zabrangi. So it has the same sort of colorings, but it's a bit more of a short and squat chili. So I'm growing that out again, probably second season doing that. But I have quite a few varieties this year that are more focused on looking good rather than just the heat.
Yeah.
On the heat side, of course, we've seen the world record was supposedly broken again for the hottest chili this year. So there are some chilies out there that I'm growing that are supposedly hotter. Some interesting crosses that have come out from some very prolific growers. The Primatali, for example.
Oh, yeah, awesome.
It's the hottest chili I've ever had. So I have grown it before, the chocolate Primatali. It's insane. It's scary. But I'm growing 4 different varieties there. So there's the red Primatali, golden Primatali, the chocolate Primatali, and there is another one. I'm sure I have a fourth, but so I'm growing tons of different varieties this year. Like I said, I'm enjoying the fact that it's more about what they look like now, a lot more. So the Turkish flower, if you're growing chili or you want to grow chilies and you don't necessarily want to have something that's going to blow your head off, but you want it to look pretty, the Turkish flower chili is amazing. It looks like little bouquets of flowers. The chilies all come out in a little like this, and they're all pointing upwards and beautiful, beautiful multicolors as well. So now you can see I get excited about these things. Sorry about that.
But it's really cool because I've seen some my husband, he's not on your scale at all, but he really loves growing those hot peppers. And I've seen some really awesome looking ones. And yeah, it's just really cool to see them. I'm not one to eat them because that would hurt, but we make powders and all that kind of stuff out of it. So if anybody actually grows hot peppers, you can still make a powder and then put a pinch in your chili or in your food and still get that taste that you love without having to, just eat a bunch of peppers.
The one chili I grow the most of every year is not even a super hot. It's peri peri. It's again one of my own bars, the chili chum peri peri, and I do more with that than any other chili that I have. It goes into most meals. I make peri peri chicken, like Nando's.
Nice.
I don't know if you have Nando's over there. I make amazing sauces with it, and it's just a very versatile chili. It has enough heat that you know about it, but not so much that it's gonna make you run
socks off, basically. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah, I like to dehydrate my really hot peppers. I mean, I love habanero level down. Everything else up higher, dehydrate, save the seeds, and go on from there. But yeah, I love adding the. You know what's weird is when you have the fruity taste, and you don't expect a hot pepper to actually you taste it and like, wow, this is actually fruity.
Yeah.
I always love that.
There's habaneros that are like that too. And it's just like, they're really good, but they're so hot. But that's another thing with like, it's so good, even though it's so hot, you still want more because it tastes really good. Like I've had some peppers where it's like, that don't taste good at all, like at all. So I don't want to eat any more of that. But there are some peppers that you just fight through the pain because it's so good.
Sean, have you been in any of those hot pepper contests?
I'm not stupid. I enjoy testing myself, but those competitions, I have an unfortunate problem. I can't regurgitate like these guys do. And if you're eating the amount of chilies that they're eating, and it's, for me, it's not the heat. The heat I can handle in my mouth, in my throat, that's all fine. It's what happens when it gets into your gut and the cramps come along, capsaicin cramps. And that lasts for 4 hours and there's nothing you can do about it. You're just letting it happen and you're in agony. You're completely incapacitated. So these guys that are doing these competitions most of the time, especially the real big guys that are doing it, they'll bring it up as soon as competition's done.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I heard that Johnny Scoville does that. Like he throws it up. I had no idea he did that because I was curious. I'm like, how do these people handle this afterwards? Like that has to be horrible.
It is. It's the first time I did it. The first time it's actually a video I did on my channel. I think when I got 1,000 subscribers or something, I did it with my brother-in-law who doesn't eat chilies, and we ate some of my hot chilies. And that night I got home and it's the first time I'd ever had it. It was proper capsaicin cramps. My wife wanted to take me to the hospital. She thought that there was something serious wrong. I said, no, it's fine. I'm learning how my digestive system works because you can feel exactly where it is in your body. No, that's the scariest part of it. It's just nothing you can do about it. Nothing in chilies will kill you as long as you don't panic. You might be in pain for a while. It might be a long while, but it can't kill you. It's your body telling you that it's hurting rather than your body actually hurting. Doesn't make it any less painful.
I went to the New York City Hot Sauce Festival last year, and so I'm tasting everything, right? And I'm like, there's the contest, and I really wanted to enter this for a long time because they only put 3 donuts in front of you. Now, I'm like, I had donuts before. I could eat that. I'm thinking I could eat it in 40 seconds. Boom, 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 gone. Now, figure out. So I went there, had my phone right in front of me like this. I'm taping myself, eating the donuts. First one, basically gone. But I'm like, I'm still chewing. I'm like, oh my God, this is like taking forever to chew. I never chew a donut for so long. But all the stuff they put in a donut, it just makes you it just doesn't go down your throat. It just stays right there. And I'm like, oh, this is not going anywhere. So I started donut number 2, and I'm like, oh, the only thing I'm thinking is my whole expectation is to win this contest and to be like, yes, I won something. Then all of a sudden, I'm still chewing. I'm looking at these other guys from all over the world. I'm like, man, they're experienced. They know exactly how to eat this freaking donut.
Mary, what is your favorite hot pepper that you grow?
You were talking about a hot pepper that's a little on the fruitier side, and I really like the yellow Scotch bonnet. It's a Jamaican favorite. It's got a little bit of citrus to it, and it isn't what I call burn your face off spicy. So it's probably along the lines of the habanero, but for me more flavorful. I've done the chocolate habanero, and it was like compared to the yellow Scotch bonnet.
I may have to grow that Scotch bonnet this year.
I have what my granny used to call an iron gullet, so I can eat the spicy stuff, and it doesn't affect me like a lot of people. But it just the eating the super hot stuff for the sake of eating it. I'd rather enjoy and savor the flavor than suck down something that makes my eyes water. So the yellow bonnet's probably my favorite.
Okay,
But this is my problem. I mean, I don't want to. I mean, I do it on my live streams, and people assume I'm doing it just to get some more views and stuff. Yeah. But the way I see it, I have to taste the chilies I'm growing if I'm going to make a sauce from it. I need to know what the chilies flavor profile is like, and the heat level, and how it burns, where it burns. And I think to myself, well, I might as well do it on a live stream so that people can enjoy it. But that's the only reason I do it. I wouldn't just eat them for no reason. I enjoy the buzz, but I'd rather have. I mean, you can get that buzz of the chili high. You can get that from a ghost pepper. You don't have to go with something that's twice as hot.
Yeah,
right.
That's an experience every time. I mean, sorry, Mary.
Are you going to enter a chili competition, Gardener Scott? Are you going to? What kind of hot peppers do you grow?
I would. No, I would never enter a competition. I don't. I think it's. I'll go as extreme as Sean, where I might taste something for a video, but I'm certainly not going to put myself out in public. This year, I'm actually growing my whole garden, varieties I've never grown before. I asked my viewers to tell me what I should grow based on their favorites. And so I'm growing a number of peppers that I've never grown before, to include the Scotch bonnet. I've grown a lot of peppers over the years, but I realized I'd never grown a Scotch bonnet. So that's on my list this year. Padron, Great North. There are a number of new ones. I grow cayenne peppers every year because I powder them and I use cayenne pepper on a lot of my cooking. My favorite way to use peppers, hot peppers, is in jellies. And so for years, we have some peaches that are grown on the west side of Colorado that are just delicious. And so for years, I've made a peach habanero jelly. Last year, I grew some super hot peppers and made a devil's brain peach jelly that was just incredible. And so that's the way I like to use the hot peppers, actually in the jellies and jams. I'll make a jalapeno jam, which is just incredible.
So good.
But this year, in addition to all those new varieties, I'm doing some paprika experimentation. So I'm growing, I think, 6 or 7 Hungarian pepper varieties that are specifically to be powdered and mixed and make a sweet paprika and a hot paprika. And so I haven't done that before, where I'm blending. Yeah, there you go. And that's one of the ones I'm growing there, Joe. And so it's going to be fun to experiment, because everything about my peppers this year is new, something I've never done before.
That's cool.
And Sean, this is a good question. Now, my wife's allergic to tomatoes and honey, right? Does your wife like hot peppers?
She's getting better. I guess that's one of the other successes we should talk about. She should have a little bit of heat when we first met, but increasingly she's asking me, because I try and hold back a little bit when I'm making a chili con carne or something like that. I won't make it as hot as I like it. I'll just add sauce to it after. But she'll say, you could have done with a bit more spice in there, and that's awesome. She won't have it at my level just yet. We have made a commitment if I ever get to 1 million subscribers that she'll have a super hot on a live stream. I don't know. I kind of curious to see that happen, but at the same time, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna feel so bad. But yeah, she does. She likes the spice now. Most of our meals have some level of spice to it. It's just makes it all a bit more exciting.
Well, guys, thank you so much for coming on our live. I mean, from Tony with the number one book in the U.S. and the U.K. and after the first 8 came out, to Gardner Scott. There's a reason why we had Gardner Scott in our first show, was because of the educational lessons we all could learn, and he teaches it from the easiest way
Thanks.
to beyond. Gardner Scott, thank you so much. You have done to help us in a variety of ways. And Sean, we're all into chilies and hot chilies, Corky and I. And so,
okay, Joe, a little bit more than me, but yes, we're into it.
And we love what you're doing. And we really believe the hot pepper community is only starting right now. And there's a lot too much drama, that's for sure. And it should not be that way. It should be us helping each other out, grow more varieties, and different the health benefits of hot peppers specifically. And Mary, we absolutely love you. You're a tremendous person. First, so kind. You're always helping out kids. I wish you were our neighbor. It'd be so much easier.
That's what I told you guys the other night. It's like, man, if Mary was my neighbor, I'd be hanging out with her all the time.
Thank you very much.
And we love what you all do, and hopefully we could do this again sometime in the future. But thank you guys so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. And the 24, Grow Big 24.
Thank you.
So take care, everybody.
Thanks for the invitation, guys, and it was great.
And thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone, for watching us. And we have after party, so check out the after party at 10 o'clock. Take care.
Bye, guys.